I was so angry that I remember pointing to a baseball bat sitting against the wall in my brother's back room and saying, I wish whoever did that were here. I would take that bat and I would kill him.
So we're talking to Ev Worthington, psychologist, follower of Jesus, guru, and Ev, very clearly, we could talk for about 20 hours without breaking. You have a remarkable store of knowledge and stories, particularly on this topic of forgiveness and how to actually help people make it real in their lives, bringing together faith, theology, spiritual life, but also the practical resources of social science and psychology. One of the most remarkable parts of your own story is you had become an expert on this. You had done research on it. You had actually finished the manuscript for a book, turned it into a publisher, and then you hit a crisis of forgiveness like very few of us will ever have any idea. Would you mind telling that story?
Sure. What happened was my mother was murdered in a home invasion that was on a New Year's Eve night, and she didn't drive, so there was no car in the driveway, and she had gone to bed early, and so the house was dark. And apparently, a young man, or perhaps more than one, saw this darkened house on New Year's Eve night, thinking, this is going to be a perfect crime, and I just need to waltz in there and take everything of value. And so he broke in, and as he was pulling things off of a shelf right outside of her bedroom, she awakened and must have come out of her bedroom and confronted him. And he had a crowbar in his hand, and so he bludgeoned her with this crowbar. And I think one of the things really that helped me in the end forgive him was that he apparently was distraught over what he had done. And he ran through the house and he broke every mirror in the house and really tried to destroy pretty much every reflective surface. It destroyed the television, the toaster, anything that it was almost like he could not look himself in the eye. So there was a lot more to, forgiving him than just knowing that. But that, I think, was one of the things that really helped me to be able to forgive him.
Thank you. Thank you for talking about that. I just tried to imagine getting that news. And when you found out what happened, the grief and sadness and trying to picture the events and then the anger, rage, unfairness, loss must have been enormous. What was that like? How soon did the thoughts of forgiveness strike you? And of course, by the time that happened, you had already spent how many years studying forgiveness?
Yeah, I had been doing research on it for 7 years, before that, but I'd been doing clinical.
So it was kind of almost, it was already at the top of your mind just because you'd been spending so many years with it.
And that, in the end really was something that drew me toward forgiveness, because we had talked about this the day of I drove down to Knoxville, Tennessee, where she lives. So it's about a 7.5 hour drive with my sister. And we were talking about what we had learned in the investigation that day. And I was so angry that I remember pointing to a baseball bat sitting against the wall in my brother's back room and saying, I wish whoever did that were here. I would take that bat and I would kill him. And so I was full of rage. And then, that night I was staying at my aunt's house nearby, and I just walked in the bedroom for 4 hours back and forth around the bed, just raging, just internally. But eventually, about 3 a.m., I thought I need to do something a little more productive than just rage. And I sat down to write a eulogy for my mom. And suddenly it dawned on me, here I am, a forgiveness researcher, a Christian who values forgiveness, and yet I have not allowed myself to even think the word forgiveness in almost 24 hours. And I thought, I really ought to think through this reach forgiveness model, that we had developed in our research, and try to at least consider the beginning of forgiveness. And so that it started me that night thinking about it. And as I worked through the model of trying to put myself in this young man's place, of here it's New Year's Eve, it's cold in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he's out in the dark, in the cold, thinking this is going to be a perfect crime. I'm going to be rich, and then he gets confronted by my mom, who's looking at his face, and he's thinking, she's spoiling my perfect crime, and I'm probably going to go to jail because she can recognize me. And it's a kid probably, and he has that crowbar, and he has no impulse control, and he hits her repeatedly. So as I thought through this, and thinking about what he might have been thinking, I suddenly flashed back to that night where I pointed at that baseball bat and said, this Christian adult, who studied forgiveness, I would take that bat and deliberately hit him in the head till he died. And I couldn't help but think, whose heart is darker here? And the answer was, well, my heart is darker than this guy with the impulse control problem, whose perfect crime is spoiled, who's angry, who's afraid he's going to go to jail. And yet I knew that the Lord could forgive me. And I thought, if I can be forgiven for the darkness in my heart, then who am I to hold this unforgiveness against this young man? And I was able to forgive him, to make a decision to forgive, and actually feel some amount of emotional peace as a result. And
So as you talk about that, and we'll maybe talk more about the reach model, and you can walk through it the next time we talk. But it sounds like two elements here were, one, trying to understand more what happened from the point of view of, in this case, the person that killed your mom. And then secondly, trying to be aware of your own fallenness and your own capacity to do something that's terribly wrong, as opposed to this person is awful and I'm innocent.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I have told that story before, and people sometimes will say, well, you're just a forgiveness guy. You can forgive. And I'm like, you don't understand. I had a professor when I was in graduate school who gave me a B. And it took 10 years and a religious experience to forgive this guy. I'm not some super forgiver. This was just God giving me a grace gift, and a mercy of being able to have me be able to forgive. So that's not usual. Usually it takes time for people to forgive and experience that decision and emotion. And this is something unusual. And when it happens, well, thank you. Thank you, Lord. You are so gracious. And, if it doesn't happen, it's like, wow, persevere. And,
Yeah.
you'll bless me when in your good time.
You have written about how it's not a coincidence that the word forgive includes the word
That's
give.
right. Yeah.
And it is something where not only are we invited to give it to others, but the ability to give it is given to us as a gift that's given to us from God. So the invitation today, as you're listening to this, is don't start with the biggest hurt in your life. Don't start with the murder or ultimate betrayal or whatever. That start with the professor that gave you a B. Now, maybe B is the best grade you ever got, so you're grateful for that one. You could start with something a little different, but just start with that. And instead of automatically thinking the story that you've always thought, what a bad person that is, and how much better I am than them, and how good it feels to rejoice in my moral superiority, just take a minute, 2 minutes, and actually try to put yourself in the place of that person and seek to understand why they might have done what it is that they have done from their perspective. Not to excuse it, just to restore the humanity of that person and ask God to be a part of that story. And then Ev will pick it up again next time.
Okay, great.
Thanks for joining us. At Become New, we want to grow spiritually one day at a time, but it's tough to do that alone. So we're offering a little more support for anyone who would like to work on putting the content into practice. You can sign up to receive a text at the end of each week in this series, asking if you completed the Here's How portion for that week. If you want, you can reply to the text and let us know how it went, or if you need prayer in taking those action steps. To sign up for the end of week reminder, just text the word MORE to 855-888-0444, and we'll put you on the list. As always, to receive the emails or video links by text, you can let us know at becomenew.com/subscribe. If you're already signed up for the emails but aren't getting them, try checking your spam folder, or better yet, you can add us to your contact list. Our email address is connect@becomenew.com. If you need prayer, we're here for you. Text your specific prayer request to 855-888-0444. There's a team of us who meet each weekday to pray specifically over every person who sends a text in. We'll catch you next time.